Hello YouTube, my name is Isabella and today I'm going to be discussing all the books I read in May. To cut to it, I absolutely did not complete my TBR. Very early on in the month I thought it would be unlikely, but I just went absolutely rogue in the middle, maybe beginning, I can't remember, of the month because I had an unfortunate phone call with my boss saying that I had been exposed to someone with COVID who I work very closely with. It was a very frightening time. I had to obviously go into quarantine, get tested. Luckily it came out negative, but it was a very upsetting time, and the very last thing I wanted to do was read. The last bit of the month though there was an upswing of good things that happened. I've finally gotten my first shot because if you didn't know, vaccines have been very hard to come by in Ontario where I live up until very recently, but I've gotten one shot to go, and yeah, May was kind of a mess and it's reflected in my reading. I think I still managed to complete 12 books, which sounds better than what it is because 4 of the books were rereads. The first thing I completed, I think I carried over from April. I don't think I read the whole thing in May, but it was Scythe by Neil Shusterman. This is a pretty well-known first book in a YA dystopian trilogy in which humanity has conquered death. I have actually already reviewed this. I have a standalone review, so I will have that linked on the screen and down below if you're interested. But I was pleasantly surprised by it. I thought the world was really fascinating. The plot and twists and turns were really engaging, fun, and surprising. I do think the characters are incredibly flat. The romance in here was just shouldn't have been attempted. It was pretty bad. Thematically, I had a few complaints, but overall I did enjoy my time with this. I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I'm looking forward to continuing on with the series. I enjoyed it. Over the course of May, I finished these next 3 books that are part of a series through audiobook, so it just makes sense to talk about them all together, and those are the last 3 books in the Percy Jackson series. So book 3, The Titan's Curse, book 4, The Battle of the Labyrinth, and book 5, The Last Olympian. I hadn't reread these books in years and just had the inspiration to do so in April and had a really fun time finishing out the trilogy. I think I plan to do a retrospective on this series because it is one of the formative book series from my childhood. I think they hold up very well. Even the humor, I think, honestly still works. I've already forgotten to start doing content warnings. Motherfucker. Content warnings for Scythe include self-harm, suicide, murder, and death, fatphobic language, gun violence, and gore. Content warnings for Percy Jackson include death, loss of a sibling, and fat phobia. As I was saying though, I think these hold up. I think they're really fun and bright, and I think they are they're just solid reads. I gave The Titan's Curse 3 stars, Battle 4 stars, and the final book 4 stars as well. No, I forgot a book. Ugh, I'll be back. This sucks. So the next thing I completed was my nonfiction of the month, and that's 21 Things You May Not Know About the Indian Act by Bob Joseph. This is a bite-sized nonfiction. That is literally what the title states. It talks about the Indian Act in its inception in 1876 and the harm it has perpetrated into present day. There are so many things in here that are addressed that I didn't know personally. I learned so much more in this book that's literally 100 pages than I did ever in our history teachings in school. Content warnings for this are a lot. There are discussions of genocide and murder, child abuse, racism, discrimination, alcoholism, rape, assault, and domestic abuse. This covers a lot of topics, and it does pack a tight little good hard-hitting punch. That was a terrible phrase, but I think this is an important read. I think all Canadians have the responsibility to learn about all the different acts of violence that the Canadian government has perpetrated to Indigenous peoples. Even now, there has been a lot of outrage come out with the bodies of children being discovered in Kamloops at a former residential school. A lot of people are acting shocked, but this is not a shocking thing at all. The history of residential schools is deeply upsetting, and I think stuff that people need to learn about. I'll have some resources and articles and stuff linked down below if you want to learn more and see what's currently happening. I learned a lot, and I do deeply appreciate this book, and I think it's one I will go back to in the future. I also reread another book, Nevermore, The Trials of Morgan Crow by Jessica Townsend. This is the first book in the Nevermore series. It follows Morgan Crow. She is essentially a cursed child and set to die on her 11th birthday because of her curse. Instead of that, a magical wizard-like being kind of abducts her and takes her to the magical city of Nevermore, where she will be safe, but she has to do a series of trials to get into a magical society. If not, she has to return to her home where her death is waiting. I have thoroughly enjoyed this book my second time around. I think I originally read it in 2017, and while wanting to continue on with this series, I realized I remembered nothing, so I had to go back and reread this book. It's a very delightful, weird, odd, quirky, very whimsical book full of nonsensical magic and charming characters. I love the emphasis on friendship in here. I am quite unimpressed with the amount of girl hate and stuff that falls into. It didn't need to exist. Even if the two young girls dislike each other, they can dislike each other's other than like the reasons that are given here. It's just so stereotypical and overdone and irritating that it's still done in modern middle grade. I love the emphasis on like reasoning and using your brain to figure out puzzles. This book takes way too long to wrap up. We kind of reach the climactic moment and reveal, and I realized I had like 2 hours left in my audiobook, and I'm going like, what left is there to do? Let's wrap this sucker up. And there's so much like exposition really at the end of the book that it was really awkward, and I was like, those last chunks of pages could have been either condensed or introduced into the next book. They weren't necessary here. I gave this 4 stars. I'm actually currently just about to start the next book, which I'm excited to do, and yeah, I'm happy to finally continue on. I then completed Blood Witch by Susan Dennard. This I was so excited to finally get to. I've been dying to read it. It's the 3rd book in the Witchlands series, and it did not disappoint. I have planned on doing a review for this book ever since I completed it, but this is the book that I was interrupted. I literally had like 2 pages left and got the call from my boss, so I reread the last 50 pages because everything kind of escaped my mind from that, and now I'm set to do the review. I just have to write it down and film it. I think this is a very good book on its own and what it means for the rest of the series. I think it is very satisfying in the way of character arcs, and even in plot. We have a quite interesting and satisfying like 3-book plot arc, and I'm excited to see the next arcs start to continue on. I am in love with the romance in here. The main one that is focused on was giving me life, and I don't tend to really ship 2 characters in fantasy series anymore, but God, do I love these 2. Susan Dennard is proving what you can do even in young adult fantasy if you give the authors the space to do it. This is only 3 books, but it's set to be a 6-book series, and there's a novella as well. I'm excited for Witch Shadow, which is coming out this month. Just a really fun time. I gave this book 5 stars. Look out for my review. It should come sometime in June, sometime. I also read This Is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone and Amal El-Motar. This is a sci-fi novella, speculative thing that I have no idea how to describe. Essentially, it follows 2 rival agents in a time war, and if that makes no sense to you, the book also makes 0 sense. I was reading it going, I don't know what the fuck is going on, but I enjoy it. Did I have a grasp really on what was going on? No. I really enjoyed the quality of writing. It was very vivid and sharp. The yearning in here, some of the lines in here made me go, oh my God. And if I was reading the physical book, I might have actually decided to write down some quotes, which I don't tend to do, but I did listen to this on audio. My one complaint is I think you do feel the length of it a little bit, which sounds ridiculous because this is 200 pages, but I think there were a couple too many excerpts that didn't really do anything to further plot or whatever forward. It was just more like yearning, and maybe it could have been shortened down a little bit to make it overall slightly tighter. I did give this 4 stars. I enjoyed it. I understand if you love it. I understand if you hate it. Content warnings for This Is How You Lose the Time More include war, violence, murder, death, mass killings, and natural disasters. I then went and read, again on a whim, People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I wanted something light and fun. This was just coming off me not wanting to read at all, so I figured a romance would help kickstart my reading. I have mixed thoughts on it. When I initially finished it, I held it a lot higher in my regard than when I came to like write down my feelings and discuss it here in my wrap-up. This follows 2 characters who have been going on vacations together ever since like meeting in college. They are best friends, but a few years ago, a vacation that they had really like fucked up everything in their dynamic, so they haven't talked anymore. And then our main female character gets it in her head that she wants to reconnect with the main male character, and of course romance ensues. Content warnings for this include death of a parent, sexual content, grief, bullying, and drug use. I'm not a huge fan of friends to lovers. There are a few ways that this can be done, that trope can be done right in my opinion, and this sort of toes the line. I like the idea of them being friends in adulthood and not childhood friends. I would have rather them be purely platonic friends for longer, not even, because we get flashbacks in this book and there are flashbacks to the very early inception of their romance, and she is having like slight twinges of feelings for him really, really early on, but then kind of like stuffs them down. And this takes place over like 10 years or 10 summer vacations, and it just feels way too long for them to finally be expressing their feelings. I like them as a couple, although I think love feelings start happening way too fast. And the 3rd act breakup in here I thought was ridiculous. I understand that it can be a part of romance as a whole, but God, was it stupid in this one, and it kind of really lowered my enjoyment for it. I was hoping for a bit more of a mature thing going on. I gave those 3 stars. The next book I'm so excited to talk about and honestly I'm shocked I didn't read this quicker in the month, because literally the day after I posted my May TBR, Orbit threw me for a loop and approved me to read The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. Now this is not an ARC copy. I didn't get sent an ARC of The Jasmine Throne. I would have died if that had happened. I was approved for the e-ARC. But Indigo, as of late, has been really drunk. They shipped this to me about a week and a half early, and they shipped For the Wolf like 2 weeks early. Their shipping has been a bit wild as of late. It is the first book in an epic adult trilogy from Tasha Suri, whom I love, and I plan on doing a full review for it. Actually, the review will be up before my wrap-up is up. The 2 main perspectives follow Malini, who is a princess being exiled for her conspiring against her evil brother, who is also the emperor, and Priya, who gets roped into some of the political things with a very dangerous magical secret, and the 2 of them have to contend with sort of different motivations and unintentional attractions to one another and navigate some of the political sphere. Content warnings for this include illness, death, torture, captivity, abuse, homophobia, self-harm, body horror, drug use, and sexism. There was so much that I loved about this story. I absolutely fell in love with the world and setting. The world building here I think is phenomenal. There's so much packed in and explored in this one book that gives you such a great picture of our surroundings, but you also know that like there's more to come, and like I think we'll have a lot more development in like the surrounding kingdoms and stuff, which I'm very excited to witness. I absolutely loved the descriptions and of the setting, the vivid imagery, and how that all went into develop like such great atmosphere in this story. I absolutely am in love with our characters, Malini and Priya. I really like their dynamic of like, I'm kind of attracted to you, but I really shouldn't be trusting you, and oh shit, things are going really, really wrong. There are some really great themes as well in here. I absolutely adored my time reading it. The one thing I think is the pacing is slightly off, and there's other additional character perspectives that I think could have been rolled through the story a bit better and not just kind of dumped at you in weird spots. But that's my one complaint. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I loved it. Cannot wait for the future of this series. The next thing I completed was Miracle Creek by Angie Kim. This is quite out of my wheelhouse. It is a courtroom thriller that surrounds a woman being accused of murdering her son because he has autism. Content warnings for this include child abuse and death, ableism, anti-autistic language, death, suicide, murder, rape, and sexual assault of a minor, infidelity, and infertility. This was a very interesting experience because while I was reading it, I was engaged, but when I wasn't actually listening to the audiobook, I just didn't care. And I think that just goes to show that mysteries and courtroom things just really aren't my main genre or main thing that I like to read. There were a couple times in here where I was quite put off and upset by things characters were saying, but I believe that is definitely a character choice and not obviously condoned by the author. She does a pretty good job establishing that the characters are quite terrible people, a lot of them. I think there's one instance that, and one of the main contributing factors to this sort of mystery that's unfolding that I think could have been dealt with better, or at least condoned in the writing better, and that is in regards to the sexual assault of a minor. I gave this, I think, 3 stars. It's just not like my main genre, but I did enjoy it for the most part. If you listen to the audiobook, there's an interview with the author at the end that kind of it puts a lot of things into perspective, and learning her process or understanding the author's process was an interesting treat. The final thing I finished in May was the Tangleroot Palace by Marjorie Liu. This is an arc that is set to come out, I think, June 15th. It mainly is of short stories that Marjorie Liu has already written. I believe she did edit them a little bit because some of them she published a while ago, and maybe the title story is new, but I'm not entirely sure about that. But these are all just speculative short stories. I think there are 7 in total, and I enjoyed quite a few of them. Anything that she wrote involving fairy tale and magical mythical forests, I really liked. A lot of the stories are sort of haunting and macabre. I really love her authorial voice, even in the stories that I wasn't particularly loving. I really enjoyed her writing, and it makes me very excited to read other books by her. Content warnings for this include death, murder, rape, violence, suicide ideation, and self-harm. The highlight being a sort of sleeping beauty, like sort of respinning reimagination that's sapphic that I really enjoyed. I haven't quite come up with my final rating. I'm debating between 3.5 and 4 stars. 2 of the stories I didn't love, but everything else I really enjoyed. Those are all the things that I completed in May. It was an interesting month. I didn't want to read, and then I didn't want to read what I was supposed to be reading, and I am now feeling the effects of that, but it is what it is at this point. I think for the most part, not even for the most part, I think I enjoyed everything I've read. I don't think I gave anything under 3 stars, which was pretty great. But let me know down in the comments below any thoughts on any of the books that I mentioned today and what your favorite read in May was. But as always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye!